you just speak to this
Yeah.
1905 Supreme Court precedent, though, because this is what everybody looks at. And even I, just cursorily looking at it early on in this, said, well, Supreme Court has said that you can force vaccinations in the school, setting, or not necessarily in the school setting, but they've said it's okay to force a vaccination. But there are real reasons to distinguish that case from what we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. So Jacobson was a 1905 case, and that involved smallpox. A couple of differences. That was a town that was mandating the smallpox vaccine, but the penalty for not getting the vaccine was a $5 fine, which is about $140 today. That's very different here, where we're talking about, losing your job. In New York City, if you don't get the vaccine, you can't go anywhere because of their passport program. So those are a couple of differences. Smallpox is also a disease that kills around 30% of people infected, whereas COVID, we know that the death rate is much lower. And especially when it comes to mandating it for younger people, I think it's much more ethically questionable because this disease doesn't actually kill them at very high rates at all. Another difference is that in Jacobson, that was the product of a legislative process, whereas what we're seeing now is a lot of mandates that are coming from executive or from universities that aren't going through the same process. These aren't elected officials who are accountable to the public in the same way. And a final difference with Jacobson that we pointed out is that Jacobson didn't involve people with natural immunity. So in fact, a lot of school vaccine mandates exempt children who've had the disease in question. If you've had measles, you can usually just show a certificate of recovery or antibody test, whereas these mandates don't provide for such exemptions.
Right, because they refuse to acknowledge natural immunity as a source of immunity. And this is yet another thing I got into with Scott Gottlieb, because his own he's on the board of Pfizer now, former FDA commissioner. And there was a study published in The Lancet, this so-called respected journal of medicine. It was funded by Pfizer, his organization, and it concluded that 6 months after your second jab of the Pfizer vaccine, you only have 47% effectiveness when it comes to fighting off the virus. 47%. Right. I'd love to compare somebody 6 months after the second dose of Pfizer to somebody who 2 months ago had a bad case of COVID.
Right. I mean, we know that natural immunity is long-lasting and durable. There's a study from Israel of 700,000 individuals that show, it lasts, as far as we know, it seems to last as long as we've had COVID. It could last for years. There's been a real denigration of the science here and an unwillingness to recognize natural immunity. And everything that, I've had the defense say in my cases about about natural immunity, you can say about the vaccines. They say, we don't know how long natural immunity lasts. We don't know how long immunity from the vaccines lasts. And in fact, everything that we know about the vaccines was actually based on comparing it to natural immunity. So they look at the antibodies from natural immunity. There's simply no reason to disregard what is a scientific fact and has been recognized as one for centuries.
That Israel study showed natural immunity is 27 times more protective than the vaccinated immunity. This is what Dr. Fauci was asked about, to Sanjay Gupta's credit, by Gupta, who's a doctor, about a month ago on CNN. And here is how Fauci answered. Listen.
And just real quickly, there was a study that came out of Israel about natural immunity. And basically the headline was that natural immunity provides a lot of protection, even better than the vaccines alone. What are people to make of that? So as we talk about vaccine mandates, I get calls all the time. People say, I've already had COVID, I'm protected, and now the study says maybe even more protected than the vaccine alone. Should they also get the vaccine? How do you make the case to them?
That's a really good point, Sanjay. I don't have a really firm answer for you on that.
And he goes on from there. It doesn't contradict his I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether he doesn't know or whether he knows and he just doesn't want to say. But either way, it doesn't support requiring vaccines of people who have natural immunity.
No, it doesn't. It's a very strange phenomenon, and I can't understand what's going on. I think there's something having to do with administrative ease. Like, it's just easier to tell everybody to go out and get the vaccine and show their cards. But this is disregarding the fact that actually people with natural immunity have higher risk of adverse effects. And that especially seems to be the case with young men, actually. A lot of the incidents of myocarditis that we've seen with the Pfizer and Moderna appear to be in young men who've had COVID. So disregarding this is really harming people. And I'm worried about when they start mandating it for kids, now that the EUA approval is coming for the Pfizer for 5 to 11, that more children will be harmed by these mandates.
What's the story with your judge who denied your preliminary injunction? Why do you think that happened?
He really relied on Jacobson again, which I think is the wrong standard. I think there's a certain mentality in the country that's just it would take a lot of courage to stand up and say, to be the first judge to say, strike this down on natural immunity grounds. The lawsuits that are winning in this arena are the ones based on religious exemptions. So there are actually a lot of victories there, but not with respect to sort of medical type exemption for natural immunity.
It seemed to me that he was just deferring over and over again to, sort of the experts. The experts say this, the experts say that. And it's like, okay, the experts are people like Gottlieb who will not right. listen to reason. I think this is you. NCLA filed a class action. Is that you? Yeah, that's you.
Yes,
I'm just trying to get my notes straight. Okay, hold on a second. He says, let's see, Michigan State. I'm trying to find his actual ruling against the Michigan State employee. Paul Maloney, that's your judge, right?
Yes, that's the judge.
And says, okay, she brought the lawsuit, blah, 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 recent antibodies. I can't find it, but basically, he says the MSU mandate is based on guidance from state and federal health agencies. Put plainly, even if there's vigorous ongoing discussion about the effectiveness of natural immunity, it is rational for MSU to rely on present federal and state guidance in creating its vaccine mandate. Well, what about Fauci? What about people who have no idea? We know that half these mandates, at least the ones for the kids, came because of Randy Weingarten and the teachers union. Like, none of that can be considered by these judges who have massive power over us now.
Right. And, the CDC guidance, frankly, when you look at the link that these universities are citing to saying people who with natural immunity should get the vaccine, they're just citing, they're not really citing to rigorous scientific studies. And it's interesting because this guidance is not legally binding. So you can't actually go to court and challenge the CDC's guidance and say, this is arbitrary and capricious or not based on anything. But at the same time, all of these universities and institutions are relying on it. So they kind of have us in a catch-22 where we can't bring a legal challenge against it. But at the same time, everybody's relying on it and sort of treating it with the force of law.
Yeah, where's the gold standard study saying that if you've had COVID, you're much more immune and better off if you still get the vaccine? Where's that? Because I've had a lot of doctors on. I've had doctors try to make the case like it could be this, it could be that, but I have yet to see the gold standard study that proves it. In fact, it appears to have come out the other way.